Unfortunately, summer school is over, which means we've been doing a lot of reading. That's because the governor's budget came out last week, and the Executive Appropriations Committee met this week to discuss the budget, leading into the legislative session that we're all looking forward to next month. That means we're here to tell you what's coming up and what went down. He's Andrew, and I'm Nate, and this is the DLC's Policy Corner, Budget Fun Time Edition.
First, a quick reminder on the budget process. The governor puts out his proposed budget for next year. The legislature can certainly take all of his recommendations, but in reality, they'll take them for what they are, recommendations. And they'll pretty much do whatever they want. As we said, EAC met this week and discussed what money is available and what they project in the future. Sadly, they said there's likely to be no money available this year, signifying yet another tight budget year.
One thing from EAC we're going to be watching is that the fiscal analysts recommended the state not put a portion of the sales tax voters supported for Medicaid expansion in that fund. This is because the fund has a surplus. However, it'll be important to keep this in mind when we inevitably hear that Medicaid is unsustainable and cuts need to be made.
On to the governor's budget. The big news is that yet another tax cut is proposed, but this one is for those receiving Social Security, including those on Social Security disability insurance. This is a $144 million cut, so the state will have less revenue, but it would save folks up to $950 a year. Our biggest question is why they didn't start with this kind of tax cut, if we were going to do them at all. And speaking of how the legislature can ignore this, EAC indicates a $230 million reduction that is likely another tax cut, but they have not offered any details.
Aside from the cuts, the governor does recommend a few large investments into the developmental disability system. There is about $5.5 million for the DSPD waiting list and another $2.6 million for competitive integrated employment. These are likely, at least in part, in response to the DOJ's findings letter from this summer. There's also a recommendation for $7.3 million for rate increases for the home and community-based services waivers and home health, which appears to cover many, if not all, of the waivers. We hope it will make a difference in helping recruit and retain qualified staff. And lastly, he recommends $400,000 for adult protective services to help protect vulnerable populations.
While that is all good for that side of the system, similar investments are not recommended in the mental health system. Other than funding for another family homeless shelter and an emergency shelter, which are only slightly related, there isn't funding related to increasing mental health services. On top of that, despite many investments in affordable housing over the past few years, we don't see any of that this year either.
Well, that's a fairly high-level overview of the budget, but we'll share more as we near the session and get into it. As always, you can follow our budget tracker as well as our build tracker on the website, disabilitylawcenter.org/issues/public-policy. We hope you have a lovely holiday season and get some much-needed rest before the legislative session. And as always, thanks for watching the DLC's Policy Corner.